I shouldn't have woken up that morning. I wasn't supposed to. But I did. My eyes opened to the dim light of a sun barely breaking through my apartment window. My head was pounding, my heart was racing, and my first thought wasn't gratitude. It was terror. Because I knew what waited for me outside that bed. The foreclosure notice, the final divorce papers, the voicemail from my boss, the empty bank account, the friends who stopped calling months ago. My entire life, every piece of stability I had ever built had collapsed like a house of cards. And there I was, still breathing, still alive. God, why? Why was I still here? What was the point of waking up when everything I lived for was already dead? I dragged myself out of bed, every movement heavy like I was carrying the weight of my failure on my back. The walls of my once beautiful apartment now felt like a coffin. In the kitchen, I opened the fridge. Nothing but expired milk and old leftovers I couldn't force myself to eat. I sat down at the table. My shaking hand reached for the bottle of sleeping pills. I stared at them for what felt like an eternity. One handful, that's all it would take. But as my fingers touched the cap, something, I don't know what, stopped me. Not a loud voice, not a dramatic sign, just a whisper, a single whisper in my soul. What if there's still something left for you? I froze. Tears started to fall, hot, angry tears that stung my cheeks. No, there isn't, I screamed into the silence. It's over, there's nothing left, but the whisper came again. What if you're wrong? I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. My pride, my ego, my carefully built identity, all shattered. That's when I remembered a quote, one I had read years ago, long before my life turned into this disaster. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. It was by Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic philosopher. I used to admire his strength, his discipline, his unshakable peace. But now, his words felt like cruel mockery. How could being alive be a privilege when life itself had become my prison? And yet, I was breathing. I could think. I could feel. Even if that feeling was pain. Something shifted inside me. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. A tiny ember of defiance against the crushing darkness. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a plan. But for some reason, I stood up. I placed the bottle back on the shelf, and I made a decision not to fix my life, not to become some success story overnight, just to step outside. The cold air slapped my face as I opened my apartment door. The morning sun, weak but present, warmed my skin ever so slightly. And in that fragile moment, for the first time in months, I noticed something strange. I was alive. The sky was still there. The air still filled my lungs. The world hadn't ended. Not yet. As I walked aimlessly through the city streets, lost in thought, my mind kept replaying Marcus Aurelius's words. To breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. I couldn't enjoy anything. I couldn't love anyone, not even myself. But I could breathe, and I could think. Maybe that was enough. For now. As I wandered deeper into the city, I stumbled upon something unexpected. Something that would change everything. But before I take you there, before I share the moment that cracked my world wide open, I want you to stay with me. Subscribe to this channel. Follow this journey. Because if you've ever woken up feeling lost, broken, or numb, this story is for you. You are not alone. Stay with me. What happens next may just be the moment that changes your life. Like it changed mine. I kept walking. The city felt unfamiliar, even though I had lived here for years. It was like I was seeing it for the first time through different eyes. Eyes that no longer belonged to a man obsessed with success, but to someone simply trying to survive the next breath. The streets were alive with people rushing to jobs, staring into their phones, laughing, shouting, while I floated among them like a ghost. And then I saw her, an elderly woman sitting alone on a park bench. Her silver hair was tied back into a neat bun, her clothes simple but clean. She wasn't scrolling through a phone or reading a book. She was just sitting, watching, breathing. There was something about her stillness that pulled me in. I don't know why, but my feet carried me toward her. My body moved before my mind could object. As I approached, she looked up and smiled, a warm, gentle smile that disarmed every defense I still had left. "Good morning," she said softly. I hesitated. Morning." Her eyes studied me for a moment. "Rough day?" I gave a bitter laugh. "You could say that." She patted the empty spot next to her. "Sit. Sometimes it helps." Against every instinct to retreat, I sat down. The silence hung between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. After a moment, she spoke again. You know, most people don't notice mornings anymore. I frowned. What do you mean? She turned her face toward the sun, her eyes closing briefly as if savoring its warmth. When you wake up in the morning, do you think about what a privilege it is? To breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love? Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. Marcus Aurelius. It was as if the universe had placed this woman here, in this moment, to echo the very quote that had haunted me hours earlier. I stared at her. That's exactly what I've been thinking about. She smiled again. Then you're already further along than you realize. I shook my head. You don't understand. I've lost everything. My marriage, my job, my friends. My life's a disaster. Her eyes softened. No, dear, you've only lost the things you mistook for your life. Her words sank deep. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She continued, when you strip away your titles, your possessions, your reputation, what's left? I swallowed hard. Nothing. She gently touched my arm. No, what's left is you, the real you, the one who breathes, the one who thinks, the one who still has the capacity to enjoy and to love. The dam inside me finally broke. I felt tears welling up, my throat tightening. I hadn't cried in front of another person in years. I don't know how to start again, I whispered. I don't even know who I am anymore. She nodded, as if she had heard this many times before. Then serve. I blinked. Serve? She smiled knowingly. When you serve others, you reconnect with life itself. You rediscover joy, purpose, and gratitude. You heal by helping others heal. The simplicity of her answer felt almost offensive. How could serving others possibly fill the bottomless pit I was drowning in? And yet, something inside me stirred. She stood up slowly, her movements graceful despite her age. There's a soup kitchen 3 blocks from here. They're always short on volunteers. I looked up at her in disbelief. You want me to go serve strangers? She chuckled softly. I'm inviting you to meet yourself again. With that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the morning crowd like a ghost. I sat there for a long while, replaying her words in my head. Serve. Meet myself again. What did I have to lose? I stood up and began walking toward the address she had given me. The building was small, tucked between 2 towering office complexes, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. A faded sign read, St. Matthew's Community Kitchen. I hesitated at the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. And then I stepped inside. The warmth hit me immediately, not just from the heaters, but from the atmosphere. Volunteers bustled around preparing food. The smell of soup filled the air. Laughter echoed from the dining area where dozens of homeless men, women, and children sat together. A woman in her 40s, wearing an apron, spotted me and hurried over. You here to volunteer? I nodded, my voice barely audible. I think so. She smiled wide and handed me a pair of gloves. Perfect timing. We could use an extra pair of hands. And just like that, I found myself behind the serving line, ladling soup into bowls, handing out bread, exchanging smiles and small talk with people who had far less than I ever did, but who somehow seemed more alive than I had been in years. At first, it felt strange, foreign. I was used to boardrooms, not soup kitchens. I was used to spreadsheets, not serving spoons. But as the hours passed, something miraculous happened. The weight in my chest began to lift. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about my divorce, my job, my failures. I was present, fully present, in the simple act of helping another human being. As the final guest was served and the kitchen began to quiet, I felt something inside me I hadn't felt in so long. Gratitude, joy, peace. I was breathing, I was thinking, I was enjoying, and perhaps I was beginning to love again. But little did I know, this was only the beginning. Subscribe to this channel, I'd stay with me, because what happened next changed my life in ways I never expected, and it might just change yours too. Weeks turned into months. Every morning I returned to St. Matthew's Community Kitchen. It became my new rhythm, my anchor. At first, I thought I was simply volunteering, performing some kind of penance for my past failures. But as time passed, I realized something far more profound was unfolding. I wasn't just serving them. They were saving me. There was a man named Henry, a war veteran who lost his family and home, but never his smile. Every day, he would greet me with a handshake that felt like an embrace. There was Gloria, a young mother of two escaping an abusive marriage who still managed to hum lullabies to her children as they waited in line. And then there was Samuel, an elderly blind man who could somehow see people better than anyone I had ever met. They carried burdens far heavier than mine, yet in their eyes, I didn't see despair. I saw resilience. I saw life. One rainy morning, as I wiped down tables after breakfast, Samuel called out to me from across the room, "Son, can you come sit with me a moment?" I pulled up a chair. He smiled, his unseeing eyes somehow locking onto mine. "You've changed," he said simply. I chuckled nervously. "Have I?" He nodded. "When you first came here, you were carrying a great weight, but now, you glow." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. Samuel continued, his voice calm, almost like a whisper from heaven itself. "You've discovered the secret, haven't you?" I looked at him, puzzled. "What secret?" "The privilege," he said. "The precious privilege of being alive." His words hit me like a revelation, as if the quote from Marcus Aurelius, the whisper in my apartment, and this entire journey had all led to this single truth: to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't hold them back anymore. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I have." Samuel reached out and gently squeezed my hand. "You were never lost, son. You were just asleep. Sometimes life has to strip everything away so that we can finally wake up." I sat there, overwhelmed by emotion. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to escape my pain. I was embracing my life, all of it, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the broken. Later that day, as I stepped outside, the rain had stopped and the sun broke through the clouds like golden fingers reaching down from heaven. I stood still. I inhaled deeply. I was breathing. I was thinking. I was enjoying. I was loving. For so long, I had believed my life was defined by my career, my possessions, my reputation. But now, stripped of all of it, I finally understood. Life itself, the simple act of waking up each morning, was the greatest gift I had ever received. And in serving others, I had found myself again. But the most miraculous part was yet to come. One evening, months after my journey had begun, I returned home to find a letter in my mailbox. It was from my ex-wife. We hadn't spoken since the divorce finalized. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. "I've heard what you've been doing," the letter began, "serving at the kitchen, helping others, changing lives. I want you to know I see the man I fell in love with again." Tears filled my eyes. "I'm not writing to revisit the past. What's done is done, but I do want you to know that I'm proud of you. Truly." At the bottom was a simple handwritten line: "You've found yourself again." I clutched the letter to my chest, overcome with gratitude. God had given me a second chance, not to reclaim the life I had lost, but to fully live the life I still had. And every morning since, I wake up and whisper to myself, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Friend, if you're listening right now, wherever you are in your life, if you feel lost, broken, or empty, I want you to hear this. You are alive. You are breathing. You are thinking. You still have the power to enjoy, to love, to serve. And in that service, you may just find yourself again, as I did. If this story spoke to your heart, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who may be walking through their own darkness. Leave a comment and tell me your story, because your life is precious and your voice matters. And above all else, never forget the privilege you hold every time you open your eyes each morning, because that is where life truly begins.